Okay. Welcome to the special meeting of the Smithville Planning Board for Monday, March 25th, 2024. Initially, with respect to emergency evacuation and health notification. In case of an emergency, there are two main exits out of the chambers. The first is to the left side of the stage, up the stairs, through the doorway, and down the stairway, out the back side of the town hall. The second is out of the back of the chambers to the exit doorway, to the stairway out the front of the town hall. The men's facilities are through the back of the chambers, past the stairway, around the corner on the right. The ladies' facilities are through the back door of the chamber, straight up the stairs and on the left. Please do not use the elevator in times of emergency. There were no minutes to review. A regular agenda, old business. Consider and discuss and act upon 2023 land use legislation amendments to the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations. Looks like we have two different matters to review today.
You want to handle the development plan review first?
Whatever your preference is.
Section 3 of the subdivision regs.
That sounds good.
I know
This one here.
we've discussed this before, and there were a couple of items where we had to make decisions. You'll see under applicability, it lists the different categories of projects that can be allowed. And when you get down to C, development plan review consists of two review processes, administrative and formal. We had a brief discussion about this last time. I think the only one that I would consider under the administrative heading would be change number 1, which is a change of use. A change in use at a property where no extensive construction of improvements is sought. I would offer that be an administrative function, but the rest of those would be under the formal development plan review. And I know that there are a couple of amendments in the legislation that are coming up that are going to do away with the historic district.
Yes.
And where's Central State? So yeah, number 6 out of that list is probably going to be coming out in the next round of legislation changes, but for now, stay in there.
6 where?
6 under applicability is the development in a historic district.
That's 5. Is there 6?
I have it numbered as 6. There is 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. Looking at the one below.
Oh, okay, sorry. I skipped ahead.
What about that one, Mike?
I think that in the new legislation that's being considered, they're considering taking out development in a historic district. But for now, it's going to stay.
So when you say take it out, what's that?
Sorry. So the reason that this is a bit kind of confusing as to what we're doing right now is because you're responding to legislation that was passed in the 2023 session that became effective January 1. There is a bill currently before the House that makes additional changes to this specific section and other sections, but just focusing on this section. That proposed bill changes the definition of development plan review and takes out development in a historic district as one of the 6 criteria for a development plan review application. It also strikes the words including but not limited to, meaning that you can't go beyond what's listed. And it's an attempt to clean up the overlap between development plan review and minor land development and really tried to make it clearer that these are two different review processes. You can't apply both to the same application. You have to pick one or the other. And they also do some other cleanup language in the bill that essentially says that unless you've classified the use as a minor land development, then you can use development plan review, because there's been a lot of question about if I'm already covered with my type of project under minor land development, then how could I even use development plan review, because I'm already in this bucket over here, which is minor land development. So there's been a lot of questions and confusion about how the two of those get applied. Ultimately, the administrative officer has the ability to categorize an application, but there's concern that with overlapping definitions and without some clarity in the law, that these are two different processes that address different things, that somebody who is using the power of the administrative officer to classify an application will just keep sending it. Like if you just kept sending everything to development plan review because you could give it to the planning board, at some point somebody's gonna say, well, wait a minute, why am I not a minor land development? Why don't I get to be reviewed administratively? Because clearly under the definition of minor land development, my project is categorized there first before it's categorized as a development plan review. So this is an attempt to clean up that situation, but I wanted you all to recognize that if you implement development plan review under the legislation that was passed in 2023, you may have to go in and make additional changes because it may change again.
So it puts historic district just in another,
It just
location?
struck the language.
just not being in there in that particular spot. Doesn't make it any more difficult or overall just,
I would say it doesn't exempt a project that's in
Yeah.
a historic district. It's just gonna have to fall into either minor or major land development. You won't be able to put that in development plan review because they specifically took that language out.
okay, thank you.
Question here is under designated urban growth center. We have our own area that we designated as a growth center. Recognized by the state to be a.
It doesn't say
Doesn't
that.
say that.
It just says development in a designated urban or growth center. I mean, we know that Land Use 2025 talks about growth centers, but this doesn't specifically say that it has to be a growth center identified anywhere. I mean, obviously it has to be identified somewhere, but it doesn't say that it has to be one that's identified by Land Use 2025. So I think you could probably designate growth centers locally and use that.
So, Michael, the items that you've highlighted here, these are the ones that you're proposing to do administratively? The planner would do administratively?
Only the number one.
Only number one?
Yes.
Okay. And that, your question about our growth center, that was an excellent point. And my quick question on number one is, would you consider the redevelopment of the former Benny site? Did that,
That was extensive construction.
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they changed entrances, and so it wasn't just going in and renting a new space. They redid the whole thing, access and everything.
That was an example. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
change to development plan review in the bill is that it changes the enabling act, the zoning enabling act back to a may instead of a shall. So you don't have to have development plan review if that passes. Right now, you have to have development plan review because the zoning enabling act says you shall have development plan review. That was an error. It wasn't intended to be made mandatory. They're taking that back, at least it's proposed to be taken back to a may, which would make development plan review, again, an optional tool.
Are they gonna make it a administrative decision?
It's gonna, the structure of it will stay the same in terms of administrative and formal.
Yeah,
But it will become optional so that you don't have to use development plan review if you don't want to.
so will that be something the planner presents to us in a project? Do we think it should be, or how's that, what do you think that would work? Or would he just make that, or a planner would make that decision on their own?
So I mean, the administrative officer does have the ability to classify the application, but I'll say that you probably wanna make it as clear as possible where things are supposed to fall, because if there is ambiguity, I think you know, potentially, if you're using development plan review, let me back up 1 second. Formal development plan review is identical to minor land development in process. It's a preliminary application and then a final application. The difference is that development plan review preliminary, you can designate the permitting authority as the administrative officer, the technical review committee, or the planning board. You have a choice. Minor land development, the permitting authority is the administrative officer, you have no choice. So there's a benefit to development plan review in that you can put applications before the planning board as the permitting authority. I think you want to make it as clear as possible what falls into what category, because I would be concerned that if it's not clear and the AO is continually sending things to development plan review, that eventually an applicant is going to say, I want minor land development. I am a minor land development. I'm in, like, this is the definition of minor land development. I clearly fall under that. I want minor because it's administrative, because I don't have to go to the planning board. There's a lot of overlap still between these two things. It's not entirely clear how this is all gonna play out and how every community is gonna use these when you may have the choice to have development plan review as optional, or because again, the process is the same, it's just the permitting authority can be the planning board. So there's value there in having that, but I think you need to be clear what applications go to development plan review versus minor plan development, and not always rely on the administrative officer to classify those on the fly, because I think you could run into a problem.
Yeah, seems like you want the planning board involved. It's like they're racing the planning board's involvement, or at least it's there. It's a lot's going on the administrative officer, that's what it seems like.
Yes, well, they absolutely removed the planning board from the process.
Yeah.
In many instances.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the definition of minor land development, those thresholds are thresholds that, in my mind, would trigger planning board review before a development plan review application would trigger it. But unfortunately, that's not the way they wrote it. When you look at the categories of development plan review, I think in a lot of circumstances, those thresholds are either redevelopment projects, which typically are less of an issue than a brand new development, because you have existing infrastructure, existing buildings, and there's an existing network there that services the building. Or they're smaller in like less than 9 units. And then you move over to the definition of minor land development, and you're talking about 7,500 square feet of new commercial floor area, you're talking about 9 new residential units, you're talking about mixed use of commercial and residential, and those are the types of thresholds that you would expect an application to go before the planning board, before you would expect any of those first categories to go, but they flipped the permitting authorities there, and gave the lower categories to the planning board and the higher categories to the administrative officer. So it's a little backwards.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge to figure out how to navigate this with the legislation as convoluted as it is, and now on top of that, there are proposed amendments. You may have to amend what you did, or you may end up wanting to change and maybe get rid of development plan review if it becomes optional, because it's mandatory now, and so you have to write something in. So I just wanted to give you that information so you can kind of keep that in mind as you're making these decisions.
Thank you.
Hopefully it didn't confuse the issue too much for you.
No, they confused it.
Well,
So the rest of the stuff is really submission requirements and waiver section. We do have to address the waiver section, and what kind of waivers we want to consider. I couldn't readily come up with any waivers that I would consider, for a land development project, considering we don't really have design standards at this point, other than what's located in our growth center ordinance.
Is extensive construction in the waiver defined?
extensive construction isn't defined in state law, so it's probably a good idea to have something that gives guidance as to what that means. And I can look something. I've also seen, and because right now it says including but not limited to under the definition, I have seen other municipalities actually split number one up into like something that triggers additional parking and something that doesn't trigger additional parking, so that you're really distilling down an administrative DPR to like its smallest component, which is basically a change of use with no extensive exterior construction and no additional parking required. And then everything else goes to formal. Because you can do that now, but if they actually take out those words, including but not limited to, you can't do that anymore.
But we could limit it further, correct? Like, not necessarily limit it, but we could delineate the specifics that it's not limited to. If the state's silent on that, we can choose what it is and what it's not, right?
I think you'll be able to choose as long as it comes from the list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because right now, with those words, including but not limited to, you can add whatever you want to these categories. And Mike, to answer your question, there's nothing in there that says that you have to grant waivers, only that if you are going to grant them, that you have to list what you're authorized to grant waivers to. So you can choose nothing, or you can list certain items.
Just kind of under the heading of administrative services, or is this something formal? Waivers.
So the waivers would be under administrative, because that's the one that's gonna be in front of you.
They're not, I'm sorry, a waiver's not under formal?
You would be able to waive the requirements
Yeah.
under formal.
All right, so it's just a matter of the AO having
Yeah,
the option to do certain waivers.
yeah, and at this point, let's just leave them out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
makes sense.
makes sense.
Under section 3. So it should read just the first sentence, not waivers may include, and get rid of that.
So then section 4 is requesting relief from zoning ordinance. This is now going to be your authority.
So if a development plan review application requests a variance or a special use permit, that application, even if it were to fall under the category of administrative review, gets kicked over to the planning board. Only the planning board can grant the variance and the special use permit under unified development review. If they ask for a modification, which goes to the zoning official, they can retain administrative with your administrative officer. They don't get pushed up to unified development review. But if the variance that they're requesting is above 15% of the dimensional requirement, then it would get pushed to the planning board under unified development. You have 15%, right? I will have to look. I do so many of these, I don't remember.
There was 5% that you didn't have to advertise or do anything.
Yes,
And I thought it was 5%.
it's, well, we can check right now. It's whatever you had had previously, I don't know if you changed it.
So, under number 4, relief from zoning ordinance, it looks like the planning board is actually acting as an appeal board. If this modification requested is denied by the zoning official. Is that how I'm reading it? If the modification is denied or objection is received, as set forth in 10.3 of the zoning ordinance, such application shall proceed under unified development and reviewed by the board. It's almost like us acting as a appeal board.
Sort of, yeah, I mean, because it's following the same procedure that a modification goes under if it's its own application. So if somebody comes in for a modification to a side setback and it falls under the 25%, they're a modification before the zoning official. They go to the zoning official, they do the mailing. If someone comments, it kicks to the zoning board. In this case, if someone comments, it kicks to you because you are the permitting authority under Unified Development Review.
Wow, okay. Jeez, but we could be. That could, up our business.
Might have something to do.
As if we don't now,
The theory behind it being that, you know, if an abutter is notified and they raise an issue, then there has to be a public forum in front of the board at a public hearing to resolve, you know, to discuss and resolve the issue.
that's how I read it.
Yeah, and it's going to you because in place of the zoning board, under Unified Development Review, you play that role. So the next question I have for you in there is under number 4 for submission requirements, and this is whether or not you want to create a development plan review checklist for applications or use your existing checklists.
Mr. Phillips?
So, I mean, the difference is gonna mostly be that the checklists that you're using for minor and major are for subdivision and land development. So when you're doing a land development, all the subdivision-y stuff just doesn't apply. So we'd basically be creating a development plan review checklist that wouldn't have any of that in it and would mostly just pull from your existing checklists that are related to land development projects and other items that you would want to see for applications that we're gonna look, if we look back at the list. It's not a huge list, so it's anything that relates to a change of use, an adaptive reuse project, either commercial or for nine or less residential units. As we were saying, the designated growth center, there might be checklist items that we would pull from your design standards for that. Institutional development, that kind of stuff. We would want to make sure we cover anything specific to those types of applications. So that would be the real difference. Most of it we would probably lift from your land development items and then cross-check things to just make sure we have everything covered.
Yes, we can develop the DPR checklist.
Whatever your preference is, what you would like to make your job.
I think that's probably the best way to go. I don't see us doing a lot of these, plan review, but with the road center, we've had development up there, we're gonna have more, so I guess, we should have a checklist for it.
Okay.
The certification times really haven't changed much. 5 days and 15 days.
Yeah, the process essentially mirrors minor land development. And interestingly, when you have a formal DPR, if you assign that to the planning board as the permitting authority, you're only gonna see it at preliminary, because it's gonna go back to Mike for final. Even, I mean, the timeframes are all the same as minor as well. references to appealing the development plan review as well, that's supposed to be getting corrected. But again, this is all just being proposed in the House, and where it goes after that, who knows?
Yeah, so there's really not much else there.
Questions of the board generally regarding section 3 that we didn't cover? Are we looking for a vote on the recommendation for this section, or do we have to modify it still?
No, I'm gonna make these changes.
Okay.
And then I think Mike's compiling everything, so you can do a public hearing with all the sections. I will double check, the list that I sent you, this might be the last one, but I'll confirm with you.
And then the last document we have is ordinance number 23, related to zoning and some changes.
So this is your definition section.
Adaptive reuse.
Yep. So we added adaptive reuse in its chronological place or in, by alphabetical order, and then had to renumber everything underneath that. And then there are a couple of other minor changes in here. We updated the definition of development plan review to, be the current definition from state law, so that's line 60 on page 2. And then we updated the definition of land development project on line 115 on page 3. There is a question in there for the solicitor to confirm. I don't think it's a problem, but I just want to make sure that that's not, so conservation development is not specifically listed, but I don't think that's a problem. But again, I just wanted to make sure.
Notice there's no growth center definition? Is that gonna, that the plan, that's how we? Yeah, that's what I,
No, it's
but
not.
but overlay district is there, or overlay district, that definition's there.
Yeah.
But growth center's not in there, and that sounds like it's a key part of what they're trying to do.
So these are your zoning definitions. It doesn't necessarily, I don't think it's defined, but, check.
How about the definition of adapted reuse? Was that taken directly from,
State law.
could that be interpreted to convert a residential to a commercial as it's read?
I don't see why not.
Yeah. The
As a straight definition, yes, but when you go to the actual section, it specifies that it's a change from a non-commercial use, a non-residential use to at least 50% residential. They didn't put that in the definition.
I think it'd be tighter with it. That's just my, so if you just read this definition alone, technically that could apply to a residential
Going to commercial. But that,
As long as it remains 50% residential.
What's that?
As long as it remains 50% residential.
well, you can
Well,
only,
I'm just going by the definition.
No, I know.
yeah,
I'm just, so,
but
I agree with that.
our zoning would act as a fail-safe for that.
it could, but there's a potential inconsistency. I just tighten it up in terms of referring back to,
Because they define it as an allowed use, so that would automatically
I mean, we can, you could use the language that they use in the adaptive use for, under this, in the other sections.
So what they did was they added the definition of adaptive reuse, which you see there.
Yeah.
And then they added a whole section under permitted uses that spells out that it says adaptive reuse for the conversion of any commercial building, including offices, schools, religious facilities, medical buildings, and malls, into residential units or mixed-use development is a permitted use under the criteria described below.
That's in
And
what,
then they have the criteria.
in what section are we talking about, though?
That's in your zoning ordinance. So we wrote that into your zoning ordinance from the state law. So what they did was they did this in two pieces. They did it in the definitions, which is entirely separate from all of that descriptive language that makes it clear that it is from a commercial use to a 50% residential use.
I don't see a harm in making the definition more pointed and consistent with,
Maybe as further set forth in
We
the.
could say that and then put the
in-
section number.
That way, it takes any ambiguity out of it.
Yep, we can do that.
yeah, good catch, Jim.
Not that I agree with, not that I agree with the concept to begin with, but
Kudos, Mr. Chairman.
If, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question
sure.
regarding development plan review definition. We were just talking about how that could either be administrative or formal. Should that be included in the definition? Because that doesn't read to me, because I'm reading the original definition that's being stricken, and it says it authorizes the planning board. Should it say something about who's authorized to do this in that definition as well?
I mean, we can make the same.
Same type of thing, referring back to,
Is that number 60?
yeah, I think it takes any ambiguity out of it. As, you know, as further set forth in.
So that's.
And I might have missed it. Did legal counsel have a response to the land development project?
You meaning adding your additional language?
Yeah, is that fine? Okay.
It's definitely doesn't hurt. If
Okay.
anything, it helps, so why not?
Okay,
Talk about the land, the call out there.
yeah.
Any further questions of board members about changes to the definitional section?
So I think the only other change we made was on line one, starting on line 191 was a change to variance, and we changed the definition of dimensional variance as they changed it.
I think I left out.
I don't think we have that.
That's not included. Thought I was having a senior moment.
You're not a senior, Al.
Bless you abundantly. A young lady told me that.
We don't want the fifth page anyway.
Yeah, I'll be in my third
You're
childhood.
not a senior. I feel like 65 is senior.
And then my responsible side.
You're on the cusp.
So this board is,
Countries?
our next duty is to schedule a public hearing for this. That's correct? Okay,
They're all ready.
okay. So I'll hold off my question until that public hearing is over with. And
They're all
we
gonna get held up in legal
pass
battles,
on to the
literally for 10 years.
council our comments.
She's saying that you might still be on.
Start charging for these meetings. Perfect job for a retiree.
I think it's the plan. The questions, I think one of the questions came up, if he's not available, who's a backup? And it should be another, like a building official or his assistant, I think there's an assistant planner, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. That's right. I'm gonna send you in to do it.
Okay, let's take this puppy home and get this finished. Thank you, Sir Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember this one. Yep. Mhm. Yeah, this is Butte.
It's one where we don't have any power again with the variance.
Yeah, this when I read about this one, it just jumped right out, right in my face.
You have the ability to grant a use variance.
Yeah,
Do you have this? Okay.
I know, it's, that's a point, Michael. You do have a point, yeah. So I'm taking with one hand and giving with another. But, yeah, I remember this one, though, this jumped right out.
No,
So you can grant a use variance, and the standard for dimensional variance was basically was lowered.
Yeah, that's an understatement, but you're right.
So what you're seeing is the change to the definition, and they're sending you now to the applicable standards set forth under 452441, which they changed to essentially lower that threshold for dimensional variance.
Is the word permission still proper then? If it's not really a request?
It's still a request, they just lowered the threshold to reach that, to get to that request. section specifically. So we still owe you a variance section, so you actually haven't seen the changed language yet. It's still coming.
Yeah, it's very vague.
So we have,
I thought we did. Yeah, we were talking about, we had interplay about the variance and,
I don't think we did. I know we talked about non-conforming lots.
wait a minute.
oh, man, I know I reviewed it, maybe I did not review it here.
Small lot, they could cut the.
It's,
Yeah, so we haven't given you those variance standards as amended yet.
it's directly from this, the new statute. Any further questions of the board regarding the proposed definitional changes? Any further discussion? Any further business tonight before the board?
Do we want to, have we been making recommendations on these as we go? Zoning
We
law?
have, but then I asked that question and I was told that we gotta wait.
Well, for your subdivision stuff, you don't have to make a recommendation, and the
Okay.
development plan review is part of your subdivision
Okay.
regulations, these are zoning definitions.
So
you
you-
can make a recommendation on these.
Do we have a motion?
Is there any need to, are we gonna need more special meetings for a little while, or we have to?
We're a ways away, I think, from the next special meeting, so I think April will just stick with the regular, and I want to discuss if we want to move the meeting out because of school vacation, I don't know if anyone else.
Are we at the point we're going to set a date for a public hearing for this?
For the subdivision regs, we want to just check and make sure there isn't anything more we want to do. There may be some other changes not associated with the legislative changes that we want to make, so why don't we hold that in abeyance?
What's the, you wanna move it out farther out another week? April's meeting?
Well, let's deal with making the recommendation, I guess. We're going to make a recommendation to the council on the zone change portion of it, the definition changes. We can do that, then we can address the change of date possible.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All not in favor? The ayes have it.
I just have a question for you all about how you want to move forward the zoning ordinance pieces, because I think we still have a couple of outstanding sections that we have to get to you. So is the intent to wait to collect all of those? Because you've still got special use permits, you've got your low to moderate income housing section, which if you don't change it, it doesn't matter, the state law is gonna rule. I think we wanted to look at adoption and amendment and make sure that the notice requirements are updated there. Again, that's not consequential if you don't do it. We just did the definitions, and I don't have it on this list, but I think we owe you that variance language, and that is probably what's left. You could do that in two pieces. Or you can wait and hold back what you have until then, but I'll tell you the special use permits may take a little bit of time.
That's the thing, so that's going to do.
And then I think that we are good on the subdivision regulations on our side. I think we covered everything, but I want to go back through one more time.
You got a conflict for our April meeting? That's what we're going to be discussing.
Probably, because I like the whole month of April as a conflict. When is your regular meeting? Yeah, I'm not in the state.
Do we want to look at having, pushing the meeting back
back in the state, but I am in a Situate comp and public hearing most likely that day. I have a tentative hold on that date. 29th. It's a Monday, it's the last Monday of the month.
Anyone looking, last Monday of the month, 29th?
I have a conflict almost every Monday, but, you know, I'll do what I can. I'll leave early, come late like I've been doing, if the rest of the board wants to meet at that time.
You think about moving the regular meeting?
Yeah.
Do we know what the agenda looks like? How heavy it is
Oh, for the regular meeting.
of the regular meeting?
Oh, I would object to that then just because I want to be at the regular.
Well, we didn't have to do it's not that full at this point, so we have a couple of small things. So if you want to try and push it, or we can keep the regular date and try for a special, maybe try for an early May meeting.
What's the general consensus of the fellow board members? I know there's one objection to doing it on the Monday together.
I mean, my sense would be keep the regular meeting and make a special one in May.
Okay.
I agree with John.
Yeah, but she's not available for the regular meeting. That's the reason why. So it appears the preference is to keep the regular meeting, and then we'll have to schedule another special meeting, looks like sometime in May.
Actually can make our regular May meeting, which is the 23rd, so we'll have to see.
It all depends on,
How busy we are.
Instead of, yeah, if we could do that, that would be ideal. Get, like Charles said, to get everything done that night. If it's not too heavy, yeah.
okay.
That's fine with me.
I'm gonna hold the date, because if I don't, it'll go away.
Okay, so we'll plan for the 23rd of May. Okay.
April, we have our normal
Yeah.
meeting.
Right.
And for that meeting, you want to,
That's what he said.
because I think we're done with subdivision. Setting that.
So, Mr. Chairman,
I have to leave.
all these changes are on the books now, and they're law.
That's correct.
Obviously, they're not hurting us in any way.
Not yet.
Do you know where I'm going with this, Michael? I mean, the laws are there, and they can be applied by an applicant.
Yeah, the things we're addressing now are the ones that we have a choice to make, so that's.
We kind of triaged this in two pieces. We started with those sections where you had the ability to make a choice. Because if the law says you can do this or this, and you don't have that designated, then what is an applicant doing when they get here? So we started with those. We've probably picked up, bless you,
God bless.
we've probably picked up a couple of other sections, like we just did your definitions. Those are gonna get overruled by state law anyway. But we picked those up because as we're moving through, we're like adding other sections in, or if there was a section that we were amending and the next section below it was like an easy edit, like the lot merger one, we brought that into it. So really what we're looking at that's left are things where you don't have any choice.
Okay,
State law is gonna take over anyway.
okay. Thank you for that, for reminding me of that. And so, in your opinion, we're on track, we're doing well?
Yeah, and I mean, it's really your choice. I think at this point, you have two paths you can go down. You can take the amendments that we've gone through and that you have vetted for both subdivision and zoning, and you can send the zoning to the town council and say, go ahead and do a public hearing and just get these on the books as we've amended them. Or you can hold them and we can continue to work through and continue to work on the other sections where you don't have a choice and state law is gonna obligate you to whatever it says anyway. The reason to do that would be to only try to do one public hearing, but remember that if you do that, there are provisions that you don't have in your zoning ordinance that you could run into a problem because there is a choice to be made, and your choice, although written and reviewed by you, is not on your books. So I think those are your two options at this point. Push those forward to the council, tell them to do a public hearing. The next set will come when we finish them. These are the ones that are, were of most concern, where we needed something. Or you can continue to hold those and we can continue to work on the other sections. But remember, we're not gonna meet for a month. So you're gonna have at least another month of not having specifics on your books.
Have we heard anything from the town council in terms of urgency or not?
I think in our joint meeting, they sort of set the tone, I think. So, it was brought up that, yeah, a lot of these laws are just gonna take effect and we're gonna have to follow them. And so they took kind of a laissez-faire attitude towards them. So I think I'd like to get the ones that we've done so far and get them on the books, because it is gonna be a little bit sloppy and we're gonna have some stuff coming in that's, we're gonna have to make some decisions. So I like to move forward with the public hearing on what we've already done, and the rest of them that, as Ashley said, are gonna be, we're gonna have to follow the law as it is anyway. So,
Well, I'm mindful of your concerns in terms, you're dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. Okay.
that would be my recommendation.
So to make your life easier in terms of doing your job, I think that's something that we should consider. So,
All right, we'll work towards that, and we can.
as long as everybody else agrees.
I think you're also at a point where, well, it depends on other things that you wanna deal with, but we're also at a point
Good point.
where you could hold a public hearing on your subdivision regulations and adopt the sections that you've worked through. And then if you're collecting others, we'll do another run through and make sure that nothing's missing. If we find something, you can add that, and then you could have a second public hearing for subdivision.
Charlie had a practical comment. At the public hearing, obviously, there's not an applicant that's presenting. How will this be presented, or will we just indicate, what's before us, and if anyone has comments?
I'll be there, and I can give an overview to the town council and answer questions.
That's my concern.
I'll be there,
What we're gonna say.
hopefully. It depends on when they schedule it.
As long as the state says. State says. How about
So we're
this?
thinking
State
that,
says.
For,
because the April meeting, you won't be available.
Correct.
I might have misunderstood you, I thought you meant.
I think two different things.
for the thing,
Two different things.
there's a council public hearing, which
Okay.
they could schedule on that, and I'll be there for that, and actually, depending on availability. Then there's the subdivision regulation public hearing we can hold. I have to advertise, 3 times.
3 times.
So, I mean, we could conceivably look at that for May.
You could have your public hearing at your May meeting.
Yeah. We can schedule that.
The only comment is just be mindful of whatever your docket is for that particular day. Okay. Any other business? We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All not in favor? Motion to adjourn granted.